Ethiopia's government has declared a national state of emergency for 6 months as rebels in the Tigray region threaten to take the capital, Addis Ababa. And the rebels have made rapid territorial gains in alliance with another force called the Oromo Liberation Army. In the past week, they have captured the key cities of Dessie and Kombolcha. Kombolcha is less than 400 kilometers from Addis Ababa. And the rebels have said the capital could fall within months, if not weeks. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is promising, in his own words, to bury enemies without blood as he marked the one-year anniversary of the conflict. Well, for more on that, we're now going live to our correspondent Girim Chala in Addis Ababa. It is not looking good on the ground, indeed, Girim. So tell us the latest on of the situation.
Overnight in the north, especially around the Kombolcha town you've mentioned, and Dessie, there were heavy fightings between the Ethiopian National Defense Force, the militia, and also Amhara Special Force and others against TPLF and the Oromo Liberation Army force. By the way, the TPLF and the OLA, the Oromo Liberation Army, which used to operate in the western part of Ethiopia, especially in the Oromo region, have now announced a merger and have a plan to march to Addis Ababa. So that the plan is to remove the central government, according to the statement that came out from the Tigray regional state. The government is saying that the Ethiopian National Defense Force are now gaining ground. They are retaliating the danger posed by the TPLF force and the OLA. And heavy fighting is continuing overnight. We have heard of different battles that have taken place overnight. So we can report that the war has continued and there is no sign of it stopping anytime soon.
Right, and there are also reports of massacres, mass rapes and widespread hunger. So, Girim, tell us more about the humanitarian situation on the ground.
So when it comes to the humanitarian situation, as you remember, when the war started exactly a year ago, after what the government said, an attack against its northern command, things were getting worse, especially in the Tigray regional state. But after that, there are other regions which were affected as the spillover effect and the continuation of the war entered to Amhara and also Afar regional states. So humanitarian agencies, those which belong to the international community and also those which are in this country, are dealing with people from the three regions, perhaps in their millions. People have been evicted from their homes. People have left their farmlands. There is no farming going on in active war zones. So the humanitarian situation remains to be dire. It was in a bad shape even before. Now that the war has continued, you can imagine how hard it is to even supply the basic necessities like food and water and others for those people who are affected. So we can report again that the humanitarian situation in Afar, Amhara, and also in the Tigray regional state remains to be dire.
All right, thank you very much. Girim Chala reporting from Addis Ababa. Well, all sides in Ethiopia's Tigray conflict may have committed war crimes. The shocking revelations include torture and rape and are outlined in a new joint investigation by the United Nations and the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission. Ethiopia declared a state of emergency on Tuesday after rebels in Tigray said they might march on the capital to topple Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Earlier, Ethiopia's government says Tigray rebels killed 100 youths in town of Kombolcha. Sarah Wharton reports.
The report from the UN Human Rights Office and the Ethiopia Human Rights Commission comes after the government of Ethiopia declared a state of emergency and called on members of the public to take up arms as rebel fighters from the Tigray region have begun advancing towards the capital, Addis Ababa. Now, the authors of the report say they believe that all parties involved in the fighting in the Tigray region have committed violations of international human rights, humanitarian and refugee laws, and that some of that may amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. Now, the UN's top human rights chief has called for all those that commit abuses to be held accountable for that. She set out just how serious the situation is.
Civilians in Tigray have been subjected to brutal violence and suffering. The Joint Investigation Team uncovered numerous violations and abuses, including unlawful killings and extrajudicial executions, torture, sexual and gender-based violence, violations against refugees, and forced displacement of civilians.
Now, this report actually only covers the period from November 2020 until the end of June this year, but the Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, has said that he's very concerned that the recent intensification of the fighting will exacerbate the situation. In fact, the Secretary-General has put out a statement saying he is extremely concerned by that escalation of violence in Ethiopia, and he said that the stability of the country and the wider region is at stake. Now, he called for an immediate cessation to all hostilities and also for unrestricted access for humanitarian aid, both into Tigray and into the surrounding regions of Amhara and Afar. The UN says the situation in northern Ethiopia at the moment is unpredictable, volatile and highly tense. No humanitarian aid convoys have been able to get into the Tigray region since the middle of October. We heard from the Secretary-General's spokesman. He said that the UN is continuing to have discussions with authorities in the ground in the Tigray region in order to negotiate access for humanitarian aid workers, but he said in order for that to happen there would have to be a de-escalation of fighting first. Sarah Walton, CGTN, New York.
And thousands of deaths have been reported in the conflict over the past year. An estimated 400,000 people have since been plunged into famine, while more than 2.5 million people were forced to flee their homes. Jane Keo takes a look at some of the key moments in the conflict.
On 4th November 2020, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed sent troops into the northern region of Tigray, accusing the Tigray People's Liberation Front of mounting surprise attacks on military bases in the area. On 14th November 2020, the TPLF fired rockets at 2 airports in the Amhara region, and at the Eritrean capital Asmara, the rebels accused Eritrea of sending soldiers into Tigray. By the end of November 2020, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed told Parliament that operations in Tigray had ended and his soldiers were in control of the capital Mekelle. But things were not as good on the ground, it seemed, as tens of thousands of civilians moved east, deeper into Tigray in March 2021. The fleeing Tigrayans accused the Amhara forces of rape, killings and looting, accusations that the Amhara region officials denied. By this time, the conflict had raised alarm bells among the international community. On 23rd March, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed confirmed for the first time that Eritrean troops had entered Tigray after months of denials from both nations. On June 11th, the United Nations reported that 350,000 Tigrayans were experiencing famine in the region. By June 24th, an airstrike in Tigray's town of Togoga killed at least 51. The Ethiopian army says it hit combatants. On June 29th, the Tigrayan forces took control of Mekelle. By July 13th, Tigrayan forces pushed south and west into land claimed by neighboring Amhara region. On September 29th, food aid started trickling into the Tigray region. And on October 11th, Ethiopia launched a major offensive aimed at pushing Tigrayan forces out of Amhara and Afar regions. Jin Keo, CGTN.
Well, for some analysis of the escalating conflict in Ethiopia, let's bring in Professor He Wenping, joining us from Beijing. She's a research fellow at the Institute of West Asian and African Studies under the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Welcome to Global Watch, Ms. He. Well, the rebels are threatening to take the capital. What's your assessment of the situation?
Well, it's a quite serious situation. Now we have been hurt because the capital city, Addis Ababa, I think is very important. It's not only the political, economic, and cultural center of Ethiopia, this country, itself. It's also the headquarter location for the African Union. So we cannot imagine if this city has been taken over, as said by those some rebel forces claimed. So that will be a big blow for this, the federal government led by the Mr. Abiy. I think also that will influence the normal activity, those surrounding operation by the African Union. Actually, African Union will have another summit, I think, very soon, because every year they will have 2 summits. One has been taken place in early of that year, another is late of that year. So of course, I think that this will be a great negative influence for either Ethiopia and also for African Union's normal, the running and operation.
And the humanitarian situation, a crisis still escalating there. A joint UN-Ethiopian report warned of possible crimes against humanity, actually by both sides. How will the escalating conflict affect the humanitarian crisis then?
Yeah, as this crisis going on, even escalation of all those fightings, that's for sure the humanitarian crisis will continue and will be getting worse and worse. Actually, now for those reasons for causing this crisis, we have been hearing those mutual, the criticism by both sides. Yeah, from the perspective of Tigray forces, they have been saying under the during the whole 1 year, those fighting and the Tigray region has been under the search by the federal government, like internet has been cut and all those corridors for offering this medical supply and the food supply, all those daily necessary things now has been also prevented for delivering. And so that's caused a lot of people there now in famine and no food. And even, as we just heard from those reports, humanitarian crisis investigating team, they just gave a lot of reports saying a lot of even mass grave has been found. So those killing are very serious. And on the contrary, and also the federal government has also accused the Tigray military forces has also done this kind of killing all the way as they march on to like capital city, or when they taken over some other states and some town or cities. So this is mutually those accusations. But all in all, I think when the conflicts going on, when the war is going on, of course, those civilian people, the innocent people, especially the women and the children, they has been becoming the biggest victims. Now the people even now fleeing from their hometown, and then they have no food to eat, even when they got sick, and then no medicine. So that's why I think now international society should come up trying to persuade all those fighting those parties to come to the negotiation table and immediately to do the ceasefire.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor He Wenping from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences.